Story 1. The guy who ate too many edibles and went out to dinner with his wife's family and was way too stoned. Honestly, haven't laughed that hard in a long time. Wish I could find it again. Edit. Found it. Story 2. The post where a user couldn't figure out why their computer was suddenly in Spanish. So everyone, including Reddit administrators, gave all their answers in Spanish. Story 3. Nobody saw it. She deleted it. A woman, a girl to me around 25, was obviously in shock. Her husband was a pizza delivery guy in New Orleans and had just been killed in a robbery, and she had just been notified. They were poor with 3 kids, and she had no idea what her next step would be. I thought it might be fake, but it was in the news within a few hours. She deleted her post, and I just wonder what happened to her. Losing a husband is devastating, but any tragedy when you are really poor and struggling is just tenfold. You don't get to grieve because now you are in a full-blown disaster that sort of never stops. Story 4. That guy whose power went out coincidentally at the same time as he was taking a shit, so he spent the next 5 minutes crying because he thought that he had defecated himself blind. Story 5. I'm not here to post about a famous one, rest in peace, Uniden, but one I will never forget that my husband and I still joke about regularly. Someone in Am I the Asshole told a probably made-up story about their friend who made artisanal ketchup and tried to persuade the original poster into putting on a skit by making a scene in a restaurant about how he was tired of boring, factory-made ketchup. The ketchup guy would then pop up at another table to share with him his amazing ketchup concoction and proceed to convince the restaurant to start buying their ketchup instead of a commercially made one. The original poster didn't want to go along with it, shocking, I know, and wondered if he was the asshole for saying no. So now, whenever ketchup is involved in a meal, in public or private, my husband and I lament that we really wish there were a more artisanal, small-batch ketchup available, and not this factory-made nonsense. I really hope that story was real. Story 6. The nearly endless saga of family chaos from one of the Am I the Asshole subreddits began with the original poster stepping aside when his family's kids tried to push him into the pool at a family gathering. Story 7. The child with the broken arms received inappropriate assistance from his mother. Story 8. A person in the Call of Duty Zombies subreddit posted a picture of a tattoo they got of an in-game symbol that included the Schutzstaffel lightning bolts and was absolutely coping in the comments. Story 9. The guy who got super high on this trip to Colorado by miscalculating how many small weed-infused cookies he should have eaten and then joining his in-laws for dinner. One of the greatest posts of all time. Story 10. That guy was at a corporate retreat on a southern plantation, and they had an 1800s-themed dress-up party one night, so the original poster dressed up like a slave. Story 11. Every time this comes up, I always post the story of the Costa Rican orgy, and it never gets noticed. Is this time the time? Story 12. This post is about grief, the waves of grief. I never forgot it, and sometimes I pass it on to others who need it. Story 13. I'm missing so much detail, but the Redditor who was describing some historic house renovations he was hired to do was an absolutely gorgeous writer. He went quiet, and then his wife got on his account to post an update. Story 14. Coconut. Story 15. This is a sad story about Jason's tragic posts that led to his wife killing both of his children when posting in the relationship advice subreddit. Story 16. Sub Guy. It was basically a very big guy with a serious eating problem who ate an entire 6-foot sub sandwich that was intended for a party of about 20 people before they got a chance at it. I hope he's doing better now. Story 17. There was an AskReddit about experiences working in a psychiatric ward. The original poster told the story of a dementia patient who thought she was pregnant and would act out a whole birth and everything. After the birth, she would become intensely depressed. Then she would be back to normal and then pregnant again. It turned out that many years before, she was in the hospital having her second baby when her older child and husband were killed in a car crash. She was so depressed that she put the new baby up for adoption. Dementia forced her to live in a time loop of those events. She was forced to relive the worst event in her life over and over until she died. That sounds like the very definition of hell to me. New fear unlocked. Story 18. The one about winning the lottery where the guy goes, "You won the lottery. Congrats. You're doomed." No, really, you're doomed. Scared me and saved it in case I ever win the lottery. Story 19. Steak window and the wife's view. I recommend the first link first. Story 22. Inverted lamp. This old man who checks containers for hazardous chemicals. Story 21. The one about the commanding officer turning the ship gets the most playtime in my head, but a few others have had a bigger shock, like the, "How did you take that photo?" One or two broken arms. Story 22. An astrophysicist named Robot Roll Call had the most amazing way of describing complicated astrophysical concepts like black holes. She posted for months, possibly years, before she got exhausted having to argue and prove herself to Reddit's unrelenting horde of uninformed armchair scientists who challenged and disputed every single thing she tried to teach us. Her account is gone, but you can still find some of her posts using site reddit.com Google searches. The prime example: what would happen if the event horizons of two black holes collided? Note that this post is now 14 years old. Story 23. Karen, who got her child killed because she refused to let a lifeguard save them. Story 24. The branches tore his jeans open and tore a testicle wide open so that it unraveled. The shock and horror in the comments were half the entertainment. Ruined the word unraveled for me for life. As a palate cleanser, when a kid is being a brat in a noisy and public area, I casually get close to them and fart on their head or face. I'm really tall, so it's usually a direct hit. The star comment is a bit further down, but it's best to start at the top comment for the full experience. Story 25. The heroin guy. He posted that he just wanted to try it out to see how it was. Then it spun out of control over the months. It was sad to see the ups and downs. Story 26. A story someone posted about a rude waitress they encountered. The table was angry and decided not to leave a tip. However, the poster insisted they should leave a tip, stating, "We're not having a bad night. We don't have a problem, so why wouldn't we tip?" They tipped especially well and left a note saying they hoped her night got better. They saw her pass by the table before they left. She opened the booklet, then sat down in the booth and started crying. Story 27. I forget the subreddit, but this guy posted that he felt so bad about this tiger at his local zoo being locked away in a cage. He said he was going to free the tiger. We, of course, cheered him on. A couple of days later, there was a news report about a guy in Massachusetts who broke into a tiger enclosure and was trying to release the tiger there. He got arrested, of course. I'm pretty sure that was the guy we encouraged. I feel almost bad about that. Story 28. I have two stories to share. The first one is quite sad. The second one is a bit horrifying. The gist of the second story is that a pregnant woman's husband and father-in-law were preparing for her death, as if they expected she would die after childbirth, just like the husband's mother did. The original poster hasn't updated since. Story 29. The post is about the girl who went to her boyfriend's parents' house. They had a tradition where they would eat an orange from their orange grove and would eat everything without utensils, like an apple, skin and all, like savages, with the juices getting everywhere. They were so mad at her for not joining them in the tradition. I often think about what happened to her and what happened to that family. Story 30. There was one reply on a thread talking about someone being scared on a New York City subway and wording it kind of ambiguously until the very end where they reveal it's actually one of the "It's showtime" people. God, I wish I could find that post again. Story 31. 21-year-old woman made a post where she was talking about the cancer she is dying from. Recently found out my cancer is back and it's terminal. More concerned about my family than me. I heard her story on YouTube, made a Reddit account, and reached out to her. But she had already passed away at this point. This happened 5 years ago. Story 32. A now deleted post from the subreddit Just No Mother-in-Law about a woman and her husband who lost a child because of her mother. Story 33. A draining and very disturbing post from start to finish. Regardless of how you feel about her language or her choice. This situation and situations like this are why I always have been and I always will be pro-choice. Story 34. Peak grilled cheese smackdown. And still one of my favorite stories. Today me, tomorrow you. Story 35. I am old, And I remember when Jolly Rancher and Swamps of Dagobah were the default answers to this question. Long ago, when the narwhals all beconed at midnight, I heard a lot about the poop knife. I like the poem for your Sprogway more than randomly getting beaten by a pair of jumper cables. And I never watched the episode where the Undertaker threw mankind off hell in a cell and plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table. Story 36. This isn't one that's in the meme hall of fame or anything like that, but years ago I came across a post on the relationship advice subreddit from a girl who posted that she would wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and thought she caught her boyfriend masturbating. She asked him about it and he denied it. First off, if he was masturbating, then the normal assumption is that he's too embarrassed to admit it. Given that they're in a long-term sexual relationship, you'd think it'd just be something to laugh about and move on. Nope. Reply after reply kept telling the original poster that her boyfriend was a sexual predator who was manipulating her psychologically. Multiple people also suggested putting hidden cameras or audio recording devices in the bedroom to catch him in the act. This post was one of the highest posts of the day too, so there were hundreds of replies. Here's the real twist though. The original poster admitted in the post that she was previously diagnosed as schizophrenic and had stopped taking her medication. Her boyfriend didn't just deny masturbating but told her that she should mention it to her psychiatrist. So at best, you have a thread of people making a mountain out of a molehill and recommending the original poster violate her long-term partner's privacy. At worst, nearly the entire thread of responders were actively feeding the paranoid delusions of an admitted unmedicated schizophrenic and telling her that her closest emotional support was a threat to her. There's a lot of unwise content in that subreddit, but that's the one that made me block it. Story 37. The guy who realized during health class, I believe in middle school, that he had never been taught how to clean his uncircumcised penis. His foreskin was basically sealed around his penis with all the dried up smegma. Story 38. You speak English because it's the only language you know. I speak English because it's the only language you know. We are not the same. I can never forget it. Story 39. There's a video of a group of intoxicated, middle-aged, middle-class white people in a kitchen. One man is attempting to slice a sausage off another man's mouth with a sword and ends up nearly slicing the man's nose completely off. Story 40. Mine isn't a famous story. I'm usually relaxed with Reddit. I expect a certain amount of nonsense when I visit, so it's hard to unsettle me. But one guy, this was a few years ago and I don't remember the specifics, but basically, I told a story about how my parents got a video cassette recorder in the early 1980s and how it was hard to use. Because it was a brand new technology, and the earliest video cassette recorders weren't like the later ones. There were all kinds of buttons, and half the time you'd have to disconnect and reconnect a wire. Remember the television to game switch controller? And this guy, this piece of work, said that my parents must be super dumb if they couldn't figure out how to press play on a video cassette recorder. I explained many times that we weren't talking about a 2005 video cassette recorder but a big, bulky $800, 3-foot-high monstrosity of a device again that pretty much no one outside of a warehouse in Japan had ever seen before. He doubled down. Now, I know he was probably just a troll. I know he was young because I checked his history, and he was somewhere in the 20 to 25-year range. There's no way he had any first-hand experience with a 1980s video cassette recorder. His history also showed he was a miserable person, the sort of person that makes me want to reinstate the draft because he needed to spend some time face down in the Mekong Delta. But I couldn't let it go. My mistake. I know, but I couldn't let this person get away with calling my parents stupid. We traded insults back and forth for a day or two. Eventually, we stopped. But I didn't. Every single day for about 6 months, I'd go and comment on his comments. Not directly, of course, but replies to replies, telling everyone he was wrong and a piece of work. Was it petty? Sure was. Was it effective? No. Did I enjoy it? Not one bit. Was it a surprising amount of work? Yes, indeed. Eventually, he got banned or deleted his account. I specifically remember him somehow getting banned, but I don't know why. I don't know if it was temporary or just for certain subreddits or what, but I eventually stopped checking and I no longer remember his username. Anyway, that's the story. Story 41. There was a guy who worked at a shipping dock in China, and he was a supervisor. Every time a crate was unloaded off the boat, it had to be evaluated by someone and then reported back to him. The person doing the checking didn't report back, so the supervisor sent another person to check the holdup. The second person went over, then his radio went silent. So the supervisor did an emergency shutdown of the factory, went over himself, and looked from afar to see the two people dead on the ground. Apparently, heavier-than-air inert gases were leaking from one of the crates and immediately suffocated the two individuals. It's one of those instances where reality can be just as terrifying as a horror movie. Story 42. This is pretty niche, but in the subreddit popping, there was a guy who had a pimple on his back that he couldn't reach. Some Reddit users volunteered to pop it for him, so they met in the parking lot of a Culver's to do the deed.